I mean, sorry. God forbid. God forbid. Yom HaSukkot. And Yom HaZikaron and Yom Yerushalayim all coming up.
When is that?
Yom HaTzmaut. Yom HaShoah was last week.
Yeah.
We just celebrated it late. We're late for everything. We're going to do something for Yom HaTzmaut Friday night. Okay, so I want to acknowledge Abe Rosenberg for helping to sponsor tonight, and he's doing it for Yahrzeit.
My brother-in-law's yahrzeit was yesterday, the first of the ER.
So thank you for your brother-in-law's a fixture in the neighborhood. I used to see him all the time.
What's his name?
Irving
Grunberg.
Yitzchak Ben Zev Wolf,
Yitzchak Ben Zev Wolf.
and also for Refuah Shlema for Chana Sarah Bas Pesel.
Kessel.
Okay, we're beginning a new parak, Lulav HaGazal. And we're going to primarily be learning Daf Lamed, but we're going to start with the end of Chavtes, and we're also going to begin Lamed Aleph. So we're doing 3 for 1, the ultimate Jewish experience. 3 Dafim and 1 Shir. L'chaim. You'll share with someone. Okay. So I'll quickly go over the 7 things we're going to learn, and then we'll dive right into the Gemara and into the explanation. Number 1 is take for yourself on the first day. L'kachtam lechem b'yom harishon. Now, understanding there are 2 parts of the holiday. Everybody knows that we take the Lulav and Esrog all 7 days. What people don't know, because they're Amaratzim, they're ignorant, is that the Gemara says, if you look at the pasuk, it actually only says "L'kachtam lechem b'yom harishon." The chiyuv midaraisa is to take only 1 day outside of the Beis Hamikdash, or according to the Rambam, outside of Jerusalem, and the time there was a Beis Hamikdash. The other 6 days is learned out from the end of the pasuk that says that you should rejoice v'samachnu l'fnei Hashem Elokeichem shivas yamim. And how do you rejoice for 7 days? Everyone knows there's only one way to be happy, and that's with the Lulav and Esrog. So when you're in front of Hashem in the Beis Hamikdash, you have a whole week of celebrating with taking Lulav and Esrog. Why do we then do something that we're not obligated to do? Does anybody know the reason? Guess. We're not obligated to shake Lulav and Esrog, according to the Torah, more than the first day. So why do we do it the other 6 days, excluding Shabbos? Zeicher l'Mikdash. Because we want to remember what they did in the Beis Hamikdash.
Also to feel good that we're doing something.
That too. Now we have to understand this in the context of a machlokus between Rabbi Yochanan and Shmuel, which is Rabbi Yochanan sees that all of the days are the same when it comes to not being able to use a stolen lulav. Okay, everyone agrees the first day it cannot be stolen. It can't even be borrowed. And we're going to learn a famous Ishbitzer. You'll see here I say.
I don't think people know that.
Okay, so that's why we're part of the shir is to learn things.
That's why you have to
So
do
now
it.
we learned 2 things already, that it's not the Araisa, the other 6 days, and that it must be yours, and there's a halachic workaround if you don't have one, it's called Matan Amanas Lahachzir. You ask for a gift on condition that it be returned. So we're going to learn that Rabbi Yochanan says that the remainder of the holiday, you cannot steal a lulav and esrog, but Shmuel argues and says, Mitoch sheyotza b'sha'ul, yotza b'gazul. Because you can borrow it the other 6 days. The question is, first of all, who says you can borrow it? Why don't we just extrapolate that the 6 days are like the first day? If the first day has to be yours, the 6 days have to be yours. Tosfos asked this question. Now, even bigger than Tosfos, Chas V'Shalom to say anything could be bigger than Tosfos, but for me, it's more inspiring than this Tosfos, is that the Ishbitzer lays down such a foundational, what I consider a foundation of the Musar movement on this Gemara, which is basically that when the Torah says take for yourself that it shouldn't be stolen, it's not telling you not to steal your lulav and esrog. That's obvious. That should be obvious. What it's telling you is if you really want to do the mitzvah of lulav and esrog, you have to work on not stealing. That's like, so you should be when should you learn about, if you're just not wanting to steal your lulav and esrog, so Erev Yantiv, call a rabbi and say, Rabbi, can I steal the lulav and esrog? I'll say, no, don't steal that, but you can steal the sukkah. Like, I'll let you know what you can steal. But you don't have to learn it 6 months in advance. You hear? It's a good word. But if it's like the Ishbitzer, which is saying it's not about stealing lulav and esrog, it's much more than that. It's about how to think about how you make a living the whole year. And if you make a living more honestly, then you could really take the lulav and esrog. Okay. You hear the words?
So if I'm breaking into a bank and I get into the cash,
the thing you have to ask yourself is how will this affect my relationship with my lulav and esrog?
I'm saying, and I don't steal the money, that's musar.
No.
Because I don't understand what's the difference between not doing something and then
I'll tell you what it is. We're going to get to such a level when we learn this that you're going to understand this very, very well. Okay, number 2. Hold the question because I have an answer for you.
I have 40,000 questions.
Why do we even assume that someone's going to make a living dishonestly?
Never understood.
Why is that even?
It's so on the musar.
Why is that even?
That's what's interesting about it, because there's microaggressions when it comes to making a living dishonestly. It's not like I'm putting my hand in somebody's pocket and stealing their wallet. There's little subtler ways of making a dollar where I may be misrepresenting something. There's you know what I mean. We're all challenged in some way. It doesn't have to be like mamish to be a ganef. I just steal. I have an opportunity to break into somebody's bank account and take their money. Okay, let's go on. I love this guy. Once I let Sally begin, he began.
I'm looking for
Chaim. I know you're 40th. Yeah. Number 2. Why does Rabbi Yochanan bring 2 teachings in the name of Rabbi Shimon, and how that answers the question on the Rambam? Okay, I don't know. What's the number 3? Rabbi Yochanan is the one who says he's going to introduce us to the idea of mitzvah haba ba'avera, which is number 3, which is this idea that you can't do a mitzvah if you need to sin to do the mitzvah. Now that sounds kind of simple, right? Like you can't shake a lulav and esrog if you have to steal it to shake it. But the truth is that there are a lot of exceptions to the rule. Maybe it's such a slim rule that the exceptions are the rule, and that's a question that Tosfos, for example, asks: is mitzvah haba ba'avera, is that a deoraisa? Is that a biblical thing? Or is it a midrabanan, a rabbinic thing, and applied selectively? And there we have, of course, a Yerushalmi, a Brisker Yerushalmi. That's a joke because the Briskers came after the Yerushalmi. But it's true that the Yerushalmi introduces us to the concept of a difference between why you can hear the shofar from a stolen shofar and still fulfill your obligation. Because the sound isn't objectively using the item in a way that the sound is free, basically.
You didn't do it.
Yeah, it's like he's like, if you didn't touch it, you just heard it. It's not it doesn't affect the object itself the way the lulav and esrog does.
So 2 isurs on the lulav, one not to steal it, and one not to shake it if it's stolen, or it's 1 isur.
There's one isur on stealing. And then there's a second thing that if you stole it, you don't fulfill your obligation. Okay. The second one is not an isser as much as you just didn't do the mitzvah. So, and the question is, he does get it. He still gets it. Okay. That's number 3 is mitzvah haba ba'avera. When we apply it, why do we apply it? And and again, there's a beautiful ishbitzer on that. There's a lot of ishbitz today. Number 4 is sukkah versus lulav regarding owning and not stealing. Meaning a sukkah, basically, we're going to learn a little bit about whether you could steal a sukkah. That's number 5. No, I'm sorry, that's number 6. How come it's so hard to steal a sukkah? But you can essentially almost always fulfill your obligation of being in a sukkah, whether it's yours, whether it's somebody else's, whether you stole it. It's still generally going to be considered a kosher sukkah. But lulav and esrog is the opposite. On the first day, not only are you not yotze if you steal it, even if you borrowed it, you're not yotze. So that we have to understand why the difference. There's a Chabad teaching and an Ishbitz teaching that I'm going to use. Yes, Dr. Greenberg.
Is there any thought about whether if you rented from someone, are you still fulfilling the mitzvah?
You are.
There's a kinyan.
You are. It doesn't have. You don't need ownership. Now here's the thing. Except number 5. Look at number 5. Understanding the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer, who says you can't even borrow a sukkah. And now the question. That's a good question in Rabbi Eliezer. Why can't you borrow a sukkah? And we're going to learn about why he needs. Rabbi Eliezer is a shamuti. He relates to Beis Shammai. He's very extreme. What we're going to learn about is that perhaps the lulav represents your individual actions, and the sukkah represents the community that you find yourself in, the environment. So you have to be more forgiving about the people around you than the responsibility you have when you act. That's the general gist I'm going to introduce here. Not according to Rabbi Eliezer. He's like, your environment is the same as you doing a thing. Don't excuse, the people will be people, no. So the only way to safeguard your environment is to kick everyone else out and be in your own sukkah, and he wouldn't invite anybody into his sukkah, nor would he accept an invitation to anyone else's sukkah. Okay? So he was very extreme. So the question then is, what about a rent? If you don't own it, you can't borrow it, what status does a renter have? And by the way, that's a very good question, because that is going to be connected to number 6, which is how come it's so hard to steal a sukkah? Because let's say you steal the wood to make the sukkah and to put up the schach. The Gemara is going to say in number 7, if you steal the wood for the sukkah, all you get for it is the money. The owner of the wood just gets the money back. Because we say there's called takanat hashavin, an institution for those who are thieves who want to repent. We don't want to make it too hard. So if you stole things and you built it into your home, we don't make you return the items that you built into your home because it's too costly. You're not going to end up doing it. So we say keep those items and try to pay the value of them. So that somehow relates to the sukkah, that during the festival of Sukkot, you don't have to give back any of the sukkah because it's considered like a home, at least for the 7-8 days. And therefore, that's connected to this question.
But comparing the beam in the house and the sukkah,
we're going to learn about that.
There's a difference, because a beam, you can give the value. It doesn't matter, time is not playing a role. But in the sukkah, if you pay him, he needs the sukkah this week, next week.
That's too bad. You got to pay him. Okay. Now let's take a look at the Gemara.
How can you learn one from the other? With the sukkah, time is of
time is of essence. Okay.
essence.
We're assuming that the guy will find a way to buy the things he needs for a new sukkah, but that's unfortunately that's life when you're dealing with ganavim. It's not always pleasant, you know. Yeah. Okay, so number 1 is there's a Mishnah that starts off the parak that says lulav agazel ayavesh pasal. A stolen lulav.
I'm sorry, I've been summoned home
Okay.
to learn. That's a good reason.
You had to learn with one of the kids. That's very important.
Well,
That's it, yeah.
You can have Zev repeat to you the highlights of the shir, and if you like it, you ask me. I'll send you a recording of it. Thanks to Lou.
Well, absolutely.
Okay.
No, we'll talk, because I'm not going to...
So.
Shalom bayit and shalom bayit.
So a stolen lulav is not kosher. And the Gemara says, number 1, 29b4, Kapasik Vatani, the Mishnah teaches it as this is the way it is. Lo shna b'yom tov rishon, lo shna b'yom tov sheni. It doesn't matter whether it's just the first day of Sukkot or the subsequent days of Sukkot that you don't fulfill your obligation. Now, Bishlam Yavish Hadar Bina Veleka. I understand that it can't be a dried out lulav because some of the prerequisites of the 4 minim, according to most opinions, that it has to have a certain level of beauty, because it uses the word Priyetz Hadar when it comes to the Esrog, and Hadar means beauty.
Hadar is Hadar.
Ella Gazul. What about the stolen lulav? The first day, that makes sense because the Torah specifies you have to take your lulav and esrog. You have to own it on the first day, but it specifies also b'yom harishon on the first day. So mishlachem, it has to be your object. You own it. But the second day of the holiday and the subsequent days, which we already explained, are rabbinically done as a Zecher the Mikdash, commemoration for the base of Mikdash, when we used to do it all 7 days. Why does it have to be yours? Why can't it be stolen? Amr Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Rabbi Yochanan explained the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Turn the page, Daf Lamed on top. Mishum dehavale mitzvah ha'aba ba'avera, because it's a mitzvah that comes through a sin. In other words, if you wouldn't have this object to shake if you didn't steal it. Its only existence in relationship to you doing a mitzvah is through stealing. Okay. Now, why is that a problem? He quotes a pasuk. Shenemar v'hevesem gazul v'esapisech v'esachola. There's a verse in Malachi that says, if a person brings a stolen animal, a lame and sick animal as a carbon, God says, shall I accept it with a question mark? I'm not interested in that. Now, it compares Gazul Dumya de Piseach. A stolen animal is the same, analogous to a lame animal. Ma Piseach Lesla Tekanta. A lame animal is not going to get fixed. It's not like a little cut that's going to heal. It's lame. And therefore, it's one of the categories of what you're not allowed to offer as a carbon on the Mizbeach. So it's out. Af Gazul Lesla Tekanta. Loshna Lefnei Yush, Loshna La'achar Yush. Even a stolen animal, there's no fixing it. You can't use it as a carbon. It doesn't matter whether the owner it's before the owner gave up hope on recovering it, or after the owner gave up hope on recovering it. There's 5 pages of Talmud in the Tractate Baba Kama where the main theme, I think it's 67, 68, 69, or 77, 78, 79. I looked it all over. It's very complicated. I'm not going to... Rashi gives you what you need to know for here, so I'm not going to bring you over there. But there's a big debate there about if you steal something and the owner gives up hope, is that enough for it to be considered that you're the new owner? You still have to pay it back, but you, for example, wouldn't have to pay back that item itself. You could just pay back the value. Particularly, let's say, if the Gemara there introduces a number of factors, but that's the main debate there.
How can you have Yush and pay back in the same sentence? Yush means that he's not expecting anything.
Correct.
Paying him back.
But you still owe it to him because the Torah obligates you.
So it's...
Because you stole it. The Torah obligates you to pay it back. Whether he gives up or not, you still have to pay it back. You're still obligated to pay it back. The question only would be, do you have to pay back the object itself or the value of the object? Okay? So,
You know, if he's Miyagish, shall we?
the people say, Rashi says, he says, so presumably people heard him say, woe is to me, I lost this thing, I'm never going to find it again. I have a question. A lot of people, they say that right away before they look. It's like, it's a preemptive, and then they're like, oh, thank God, it's here in my pocket, Where's my wallet? I lost it. I'll never find it. Oh, here it is. So I don't know if it's talking about a crazy person that I am sometimes, where I say that first before I look at it. I don't really mean it. I just rev myself up for the loss.
Rhetoric is non-binding.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Give it up
talking.
on my cell phone.
It's not talking about when you're acting like a meshugana before you looked, because that you're entitled to be a meshugana for a moment. It's saying you looked, and you're like, it's nowhere. I can't. When you like really look for something, and then you say, there's no way I'm going to get this back.
Maybe the time frame also.
Whatever it is, but he made a declaration. So you ask, how do we know? We know he made a declaration. He's like. Somebody said, "What happened to your car?" He's like, "Unfortunately, I lost it, and I'm never getting it back. I know I'm never getting it."
So the police report is I'm not going.
Yeah.
I know it's not going to be found.
Yeah. So, now Bishlam lefnei yush adam ki yakir mikem amar achmana. Now it makes sense logically that before the owner gives up hope, verbally declares that he will never be able to get that object back. There's a verse that supports that. There's an idea. It says when a person brings an offering, has to be theirs, from yours. V'lav didehu, and this is a stolen animal. Elalach hayush hakanya biyush. But why don't we say, according to the opinion that we're holding by now, Rashi points out, even though it's a debate, but we're going to go with the opinion that says the thief can become the owner once the original owner gives up. It doesn't mean that the thief is not responsible to pay for it, but it's just that they have to pay the value of the item, not the actual item, according to that opinion. So at that moment, the animal should at least technically belong to the thief, and he should be able to offer it. The answer is no, because the Torah says, have a mitzvah haba baver, because there's a new teaching here. Because your only relationship with it as a supposed owner or exerting control or being able to do anything with it at all, including offering it, is because it came into you by illegal means, through stealing. So that's considered a mitzvah haba baver. Now, therefore, what's the teaching? A mitzvah haba ba'avera, the Torah doesn't have to tell you this item needs to be yours for you to do the mitzvah. It does do that, but for the first day. It doesn't do that for the subsequent day, but it doesn't need to, because it's a broader category of you can't do a mitzvah like Lulav and Esrog with something that's stolen. Okay, so that's
Rabbanon, or this is...
That's a machlokus. That's a machlokus. Good point. What is it?
I have a
Now,
question.
I don't have any more time for this question because I'm very busy answering your prior question. Okay, you already tied me up here. So listen to the answer to your first question. So let's learn. I'm going to go straight to they call it the etzem zach, the real thing here. So let's talk about the first day versus the other days. Okay? So the first day, v'lekachtem lechem, represents taking what is yours, and on a psychological level, what that represents is connecting to the individual root of who you are, what you are created to do in this world. Obviously, stealing something that belongs to someone else compromises v'lekachtem lechem, taking that which is yours. As we already know, the Me'ashaloch says that the whole point of the lulav is correcting everything throughout the course of the year that comes into your hands, that it shouldn't be stolen. It should be obtained illegally, not just a lulav. But it's more than that. The first day is it can't even be borrowed. It took me a long time to come to terms with it's legal to borrow something.
That's the cost of lachem.
What?
It has nothing to do with whatever it's there's a cost.
That's because Rabbi Schwartz is your Rebbe. And I respect him very much and I love him very much. But I have a relationship with the Me'ashaloch. So I looked at the Me'ashaloch, and that's okay. If that works for you, that's good.
Is there a Bruce rule, like saying, it's
so-
yours?
Yes, of course there is.
Okay, good.
Of course there is, called Matana Manas Lahachser. There's a halach, legal walk around. But let's talk about what could be wrong with borrowing something. So I was thinking about this and here's what I came up with, and it's not no big chiddush, but I think it's very important if you're going to go in the way of the Meshulach that says there's a reason for it, like the Rambam. He's like a philosopher. I'm going to give you an explanation that you could kind of have a tangible, philosophical, psychological benefit if you follow this. And this is what it is. Sally, sometimes you redeem yourself when you just come up with these things. How did you know that? Did you look at my notes?
You should listen to me more often.
You have what to say. You have what to say. So here's what it is. Sally is correct. He said it's identity. You're trying to figure out who you are. Now, the truth is, there's a lot of your identity that's taken from other people, and it should be. You have parents, you have teachers. They're trying to inculcate you with ethics and teaching, so you better have learned from them about how to behave, and if you were a bad student, and your excuse is, I don't want to borrow other people's ideas. I want it to be a unique individual that thought of things on my own. You're a crackpot, you're just a bad kid who didn't want to you're what is it called? You're anti-authority. You're just a troublemaker. No, it's got to be a little bit different than that. Of course, there's an overlay of things that you need to develop from your parents and teachers. But at a certain point, there's a word psychologically that we use is called individuation, which means you are not just a part of your environment. You're not just a student or child of your teachers and parents. You are that, but that's not the definition the definition of you are from beginning to end. There's some part of you that Hashem created that you have to define. Even in Torah, that's why we say V'sein chalkeinu b'sarasecha, that God should give you your portion. God should give me my portion of the Torah. That means there's a part of Torah. We call it what you're mechadish, what you create, but it's not necessarily creative in the sense of coming up with a novel interpretation. It could be that, but it could be the way you experience things that are unique to you. And in that sense, you can't borrow that. You can't just be you can't be a clone of your Rebbe or just exactly the way your parents wanted you to be. You have to figure out who you are. Yes?
Why this mitzvah then? Why taka this mitzvah for this idea?
Because the Nanuim is acting, is moving, is saying, I've got hands, I can do something with them, and they could be what I do. And you're doing it in every direction, and you're bringing it back to you. And, for example, also the Daled Minim represent the four types of people. Who are you in this binding of the four things? And it also represents, I don't want to use Kabbalah here, because Meshulach isn't so Kabbalistic necessarily. I mean, you could make it work, but it isn't. It represents what you do versus who you are from your parents. Okay?
What about candle lighting, like boring candles for Shabbos? Isn't it the same? You act, it's individuation, you fulfill a mitzvah.
So Sally, it's a good question. Can you say this with other mitzvahs? And the answer is yes, you can. But right now, there's something very powerful, and there's a story with the Barditchever. The Barditchever held that this mitzvah is the most powerful mitzvah in terms of showing the choices that you make. That God does not control you; you are making your choices. Well, but he actually did it in private because the power of his shaking the lulav was so much so that sensitive people would pass out. They would literally faint. And there's a story like that with one of his semi-adopted kids saw him privately in his own sukkah, shaking the lulav, and he passed out because this idea of how much power an individual person actually has. We want to believe we don't really, it doesn't make it,
I wouldn't mind passing out from watching his man.
Yeah.
Just
So-
one quick.
Yeah.
If at the same time you're koshering the stealing to perform the mitzvah, by
you're stealing to do
the
it, yeah.
item, aren't you preventing the other person from being able to?
Yeah,
perform
so
the mitzvah?
stealing
Yeah.
is like you're literally, who are you? Well, I steal. I don't, it's not mine. So you're definitely not doing the thing. But even borrowing, where usually borrowing is legal, but it means like you're not doing enough to find out who you are. You're like borrowing your identity. So thank you, Sally, for that. Okay. Now, we talked about the Zeichel. So by the way, that's another way of answering the question, what's the machlokus between Rabbi Yochanan and Shmuel? Rabbi Yochanan says, obviously he holds like mitzvah b'avera is not kosher, but it's more than that. Rabbi Yochanan says we compare the rest of the holiday to the first day, even though it's for two different reasons. We compare l'kachtem l'chem b'yom harishon. You have to take on the first day, it has to be yours, can't even be borrowed. On the second day, it can't be stolen. We do the idea of mitzvah haba b'avera because we equate them somewhat to each other. Not totally. It can be borrowed, which means sometimes borrowing is fine as long as you're not stealing. Comes Shmuel and says, no, mitoch sheyotze b'sha'ul, because you could borrow it on the subsequent days. Yotze nami b'gazul, you can also steal. Well, let me ask you, if you say that to somebody from the street, it makes absolutely no sense. I'm allowed to borrow, so that means I can also steal. No, it doesn't. Mitoch what? Because I can borrow, I can steal? It doesn't make any sense. Of course it's different. That's why you could never learn Gemara out of context. What it really, it's the very dangerous thing. That's why people who hate us quote Gemaras out of context. They usually make up the Gemaras. But even if they don't, it can be dangerous because it doesn't mean the words itself. It means a context. So what does it mean here? Does anybody know what it means? Yes, Sally. You're going to be 2 for 2 if you get this one.
If you don't impose one law, why should you impose the other law? It has nothing to do with what the law is. The first law is Gazel.
Okay, good. So hold the thought. Now listen. It said, what's the difference between the first days and the last days? The first days is all about your individuality. What are the other 6 days? V'samachtem lifnei Hashem Elokechem. Communal. Rejoice before God. Who's before God in the base of Mikdash? We all are. We're all going to, we have a aliyah. We make Ola Regel. That's the original aliyah. Was even if you lived in Eretz Yisrael, you went up for the holidays. So the simcha of Lulav and Esrog, the rest of the days, is not about your individuality. So once it's not about your individuality, we're not even worried about the stealing part. Not that to say stealing is okay. It's just to say it's a different mitzvah. The mitzvah is different. Okay, that's number 1. Let's go to number 2. Let's look between. Rabbi Yochanan has 2 teachings. The first one we just did. So let's continue with number 2, which is the second teaching. You see where it says number 2. V'amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. It's a related teaching. Art School says related. Rabbi Yochanan also says in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. What is the meaning of the pasuk that says, I am Hashem, and I love justice, but I hate when somebody is a thief and steals an animal for an Ola offering. Ola offering is completely given to the Mizbeach, to the altar, unlike other Karbanot where they're shared between the Kohanim, the owners. Like a Shlomim is famously shared with everyone, right? So the Ola is totally given over to the Mizbeach. Mashal lebasar b'dam shaya over al beis hamachas. This verse can be explained with an analogy of a king who is coming into Manhattan. Trump's coming into Manhattan.
Basar Badam is a king?
Yes. Trump is coming into Manhattan, and despite everything he's been saying about trying to invalidate the midtown congestion pricing, they say, Mr. President, all this money is yours anyway, so we don't think you should pay the toll. And Trump in his magnanimous spirit says, I will absolutely pay the congestion pricing. Amr la'avadav, he told his chauffeurs, Tenu mechas l'mochsim, pay the toll to the toll collectors. Amr la'avadav kol mechas kula shulchahu. They said, King, Trump, all of the money, all of the federal money, I guess this is not a good analogy because it's not federal money. But if it would have been federal money, it would have been a better analogy. All of the federal money is going to be coming to you anyway. Now this is a king, so it's not a good analogy at all, but maybe it is. We'll see. The verdict is not out yet. So he says it's all coming back to you anyway, the money. Pay the toll anyway. I want to be an example. I don't want other people to be skipping out on the toll, so pay the toll and everyone will learn from me. That's the same thing. When it says, when Hashem says, I hate thievery and I hate the Nola offering, don't do me any favors. Don't bring me a gift. You can say, what do you mean? The whole world is yours, so I'm not stealing it from anyone else because it's ultimately going to go to you. He says, no. I need there to be order here. I don't like stealing. The only way to do it is to tell people I don't like it stealing even if it's going to me. I have no interest in it. Okay, now what's the difference between the first one and the second one? That's a question people ask. And I don't want to get into the Rambam because I don't have time to get into it, but to answer a question on the Rambam with explaining that they both seem to be indicating the exact same point, which is mitzvah haba ba'avera. You shouldn't do this, but why the second analogy? Is it just to add a little flavor, like a little story? That's a simple thing. It's not really different. It's just adding a personal Trump story.
One is personal and one is communal. The first is for you, and the second one is how it affects society.
Okay, that's good. That's good. We're going to continue because it actually, to really answer the question, I have to bring in the Rambam, but it's not for now. Number 3. Now we get into the meat and potatoes. So what exactly is mitzvah haba ba'avera? We already learned about it, and let's talk about it for a moment. We already mentioned there's a Tosfos here that says it's a deoraisa, and there's a Tosfos, I believe, on Daf Tes in our Masechta that says it's D'Rabbanan. So Tosfos, by the way, how can Tosfos argue with himself? We learned this a couple of weeks ago.
He's a bunch of different people.
It's not one person, so it's okay for him to argue on himself because it's not one person. So the Rishonim are debating whether this principle itself is a D'Oraisa or a D'Rabbanan. That's A. Now B is by Karbanot is one of the main sources, including the Gemara here, that brings in the Ola offering. Now B is we have this Gemara by an opinion on Sukkot Daf Tes that says that you can't have a stolen sukkah. Now our Gemara is going to pretty much disagree with that, but that's another time where mitzvah haba ba'avera is a factor, or actually, or perhaps it's a verse that teaches us that. And D, by shofar, it is permitted, and we mentioned that it's permitted, and the Yerushalmi explains the difference is basically whether it's a chefza or a gavra, whether it's, if you are just obligated to hear the shofar, then it's okay. It's not ideal, but you're still fulfilling your obligation if the person blowing the shofar stole the shofar. Because it's an obligation on you. It's not, you don't have an object that must be shaken or taken. It's just a sound that you have to hear.
You couldn't be Yosef stolen tzitzis because that's on the baguette itself that you're stealing.
So so if you want to take that to its logical conclusion, you would make this brisker distinction. When the mitzvah is on the object then we would say it's forbidden when it's stolen because mitzvah ba'aver. When the mitzvah is on the subject, like I have to hear the sound of the shofar, then you wouldn't say the principle of a mitzvah ba'aver. The only problem is that doesn't hold up. I'm not going to get into it. It just doesn't hold up. I'm going to basically tell you there's a lot of different Gemaras, and a lot of the Rishonim say this is problematic because mitzvah ba'aver it's inconsistent. We don't find the rabbis applying it in all cases across the board. And even when you come up with a principle of when it should be applied versus when it shouldn't be applied, it still doesn't usually work.
It's usually, when you hear shofar, but if it's gano, if it's gazel, you only know it at the ava. You don't know at the time. So
I hear you. But even if you know, I mean, I'll hear what this is quoting the Rambam, which is based on the Yerushalmi. The Rambam says, shofar shel avodah zarah ein token bo. Don't use the shofar that was used for idolatry. L'chadchila v'nitaka b'yatza, but if you did, you still fulfill your obligation. Shel ir nidachas imtaka b'lo yatza. If you use it from a city that was condemned to be destroyed, then you can't do it. If you did, you still didn't fulfill your obligation. Shofar hagazel shetaka b'yatza. However, a stolen shofar, you fulfill your obligation. He doesn't even say l'chadchila you shouldn't. Obviously, you shouldn't, but if you did, you did. She'eina mitzvah ela b'shmias hakol. The mitzvah is only to hear the sound.
what about the person who took
It doesn't matter. Even if you didn't touch it, even if you didn't pick it up, if you somehow could just like blow it without, meaning you don't really need to pick it up. The fact that you did doesn't matter because you don't need to. It's just getting a sound out of it. It's not. You see, to steal something, you have to take it from somewhere. Since you don't have to technically take it from somewhere, you're not technically stealing the sound. The sound just is coming out of it without
the guy's
it
trying
being.
to blow, it's not coming out. He said, let me do it. And you do it, and it's not yours.
You're yotze. The guy, and let's say that happens. Sometimes you have a very unhappy Baltika. He's not getting it out there, but it's his shofar. And the rabbi says, let the other guy blow it. You're doing a terrible job. And the guy says, no, I'm not giving him my shofar. I'm not saying the rabbi should say, just steal it from him. But if he does, you're yotze. Okay? That's the good news. Thank God. Yeah. Okay, so that's the Rambam. He's quoting the Yerushalmi, basically, which all of the briskers like, because it's a chavtza gavra type of thing. But again, as I mentioned, there are limitations to that.
Mare.
That is one of the limitations. Yes, you are correct.
Sounds correct.
We may just continue this next week because I have I'm just about halfway through. We started late. We really have to start on time. Next time we'll start on
You
time.
waited for me, huh?
We did.
I have to come rush to Brooklyn just for that.
Thank you.
So I have a question.